everyone, it is Dani'i and welcome to this updated video this evening. I trust and hope that you're doing fantastic, and we're going to be talking about Tropical Storm Philippe, which has prompted tropical storm watches for parts of the Leeward Islands, and there could be additional watches or even warnings being in effect later tonight. And so we'll be taking a close look at the latest coming from the National Hurricane Center, as well as some model data. And by the way, there we can see Rena up there, which has now been downgraded to a tropical depression, and it should become a remnant low very soon, maybe as soon as tonight going into early tomorrow. That is not an area of concern. So let's go on to the satellite imagery, and here we can see that the tropical storm is quite prominent to the east of the Lesser Antilles. Now it is being heavily sheared right now, so all of the activity is confined to the eastern part of the cyclone. Let's zoom in here. Firstly, we're going to be talking about the rest of the Caribbean and surrounding areas, and we'll go back to Philippe. So we want to look at what's happening close by. So in the Caribbean, we can see lots of showers and thunderstorms across some parts of the Bahamas, sections of Cuba, even for Jamaica, Hispaniola, near Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and earlier even over in some parts of the Lesser Antilles. There was some rainfall from all that activity feeding into Philippe. And across parts of northern South America going to Central America, we also see that there are some developing thunderstorms this evening, helping to offset that heat, but at the same time, a lot of heavy rainfall can trigger flash flooding. So that is a concern. Hopefully not occurring right now across anywhere. But now let's drift back to the east, and here is Philippe just in the vicinity of the Lesser Antilles. And so as I said earlier, it is being sheared right now. And speaking of, let's look at that wind shear map. So here it is. It might be a bit confusing, but those red lines indicate those strong upper level winds which are displacing the activity, and there we can see some smaller lines, and if you look closely you can even see those arrows showing the direction from which the wind is blowing. So those winds coming in from the northwest helping to displace all that activity in Philippe. So what happens is that as those thunderstorms are growing, they're developing nicely, trying to wrap around the entire system, those winds just blow them away and keep them confined to the southeastern part of the storm. So that is exactly what we're seeing here. On the infrared satellite, that did not depict it well, so let's move on to the visible imagery, and there we can see that center of circulation. Now in those earlier frames, there we're seeing those yellow dots indicating lightning strikes, and look at that new puffiness forming. That was some new convection attempting to wrap around the center. But if you look closely, even at those very light feathery clouds, take a look at that eastward direction. So those upper level winds are really at work helping to displace all the activity. Notice how it just blows off to the east. That it has been the trend with the system, and that is why it is so asymmetrical right now. And trust me, if this was a symmetrical storm we were talking about, many islands would be impacted right now. But again, all that activity is confined to the southeast of the center. However, the wind shear is expected to improve, and we might see some slow strengthening of the system, and then down the road it could manage to reach hurricane status. But let us go on to the latest from the National Hurricane Center. So here we have the cone, and we can see that it has maximum sustained winds of 50 miles per hour and moving to the west-northwest at 7 miles per hour. So it has begun that turn now. Earlier it was moving westwards, so it has now been moving to the west-northwest. It will eventually make that turn up to the north, but there is a chance that the center could move a bit further west than anticipated. So we definitely have to watch it. But if we look closer here, we can see that bright, that vibrant yellow shade, and that is Antigua and Barbuda under a tropical storm watch. So those tropical storm conditions will be possible as we head into as soon as tonight, going into tomorrow, and potentially into Tuesday as well. So that is the time frame to expect those impacts. And there we also see that mustard shading just where that X is. That X is showing the location of the center, and then that mustard shading is representative of tropical tropical storm force winds. So this ties in with exactly what I was explaining earlier. We see that those tropical storm force winds are confined over to the eastern side of the system. But as it makes its way a bit closer as we head into tonight, going into tomorrow, and then overall through the early part of this week, it could bring those impacts, those tropical storm impacts, to sections of the Leeward Islands. So we want to go ahead now and take a look at what some models have to show as it relates to the rainfall activity expected. And we're going to be kickstarting with Euro. So this is the total for the next 3 days. This is as we head to Wednesday. So not all expected in just one day, but notice that. So quite interesting here, where some rainfall activity is actually expected for the ABC Islands, which have been very dry. So they have been dealing with very dry, hot conditions. So at some point through this time frame, there could be some increase in rainfall activity for the ABC Islands. That's some good news. Hopefully it actually comes to fruition. So fingers crossed for that. But as we take a look at what the Euro has to show, heading more to those shades of purples and the pink, that lighter pink shade, that is very high rainfall totals, up to 6-7 inches. Even where we're seeing those shades of very pale blue, up to 10 inches of rainfall. So that is all expected offshore. There we can see the islands, and we're seeing mostly that red shading indicating rainfall amounts maybe from anywhere from 3/4 of an inch over to an inch, and even up to 2 inches across some areas, mostly for Antigua and Barbuda. But most islands could experience some periods of heavy downpours here and there as Philippe makes its way by. Now let's move on to the GFS model. So GFS is actually showing that, hey, the system is actually going to be bringing more rainfall to parts of the Leeward Islands. There we can see some of those shades of purples, even that pink shade. So up to 3.5, maybe even 4 inches isolated in some areas in terms of that rainfall activity expected. So GFS is showing that there is going to be more rainfall for Anguilla, heading to St. Martin, St. Bartholomew, Ceiba, St. Eustatius, St. Kitts and Nevis, Montserrat, Antigua, Barbuda, even for Guadeloupe, parts of Dominica, and potentially even into the Windward Islands as well, Martinique, there could be some substantial rainfall activity. Now let's head on to the ICON model. ICON is showing something a lot more severe or intense compared to the previous models. So here we can see it showing some of those pale shades of pink for Barbuda. Very interesting here. Very high rainfall totals throughout this time frame here. So there is going to be a big determinant of whether or not these heavy rainfall totals are experienced, and that is the shear. The shear has been taking its toll, and as I said earlier, it could subside a bit and allow for the system to become a bit more symmetrical, and in that case we would see more activity over in the western half of the system. So because it is going to be passing to the east of the islands, it would be the western side that really brings those impacts. But as we're currently seeing, the system is struggling to get that symmetric appearance. So if it is that there is more activity over in the western side of the storm, then that would allow for a lot more rainfall. And by the way, the rainfall, I know it would be very much appreciated. I know some of you guys might even be excited right now because it has been so hot and dry. There hasn't really been much rainfall through this hurricane season for the northeastern islands. So this could be some good news in terms of relief from those drought conditions. But at the same time, the heavy rainfall, the possible heavy rainfall could induce flooding, even those landslides, mudslides as well. So that is going to be something to look out for. And guys, I implore you to all take necessary precautions once required. Stay safe, listen to your local officials, and do not take any unnecessary risks. And then of course I'll be here again tomorrow morning, where I'll be talking a lot more about what's happening with the system. So in terms of the tropical storm impacts for Antigua, Barbuda under that watch, there could be those gusty winds for most of the Leeward Islands, and even for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. These are going to be a bit rougher than usual with the passage of the system. And then of course there could be that very heavy rainfall across sections of the Leeward Islands. And so I will keep you posted, and that is pretty much what I wanted to share with you for now. So I hope you found this video to be quite informative. If you have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comments. I'll respond to you once I can. And remember to always be with the wise.